So now that you've given the main body of the speech, set up the intro, and previewed the main points that you're going to talk about, it's time to go ahead and move into the main body of your speech. So this is the point where you kind of bring in those main ideas. So at this point, you should have settled on a topic and decided which aspects of that topic are of the greatest importance of your speech. These aspects are going to become your main points. Now, there's not exactly a rule on how many points should appear in the body, but a general thing is that most students go with 3 main points. If you have 2 really big points and you don't think you can really get through them in the time allotted, okay, maybe go with 2 points. But keep that time in and make sure that you're getting the appropriate information that the audience needs to understand your topic. And make sure that it fits into the time frame. All right. So, as I mentioned before, sources are going to be an important part of this speech. As in the past, you can't just make everything up. You need to establish your credibility by giving us some sources. So, when organizing the body of this speech, you want to find places to put these references to your research. Remember, the purpose of the informative speech is allow your audience to learn something new about your immigration topic. So, when you give source citations, it adds credibility to the ideas that you're giving to your audience. So, for example, let's say you were given an informative on rock climbing, and you cited several other sources who confirm your knowledge. The audience is likely to see you as a credible speaker who provides ample support for your ideas. If you don't give references, your speech is more like a storytelling speech, and frankly, we already did that. To complete this assignment effectively, and with the grade that you want, you have to use source citations. You can look in your textbook or talk to me more individually on specifically how they're supposed to go, but I just want to give you a couple of tips that have hurt students in the past. First off, a good general rule is to have about 1 source per minute. Secondly, you should always cite the source first. Often students will give a bunch of information and be like, oh, and this came from this. That's not good. To establish credibility, the source needs to happen first. Along with that line, don't cite the URLs of websites. For example, and this is a double bad here. So lots of information about how to get a driver's license. And I found this information on dmv.gov. Really, really bad. Better thing to do would be say, according to the Department of Motor Vehicles websites, this interesting statistic can be presented. That way you establish credibility before the information is presented. Finally, and kind of obviously, never give statistics without citing a source. If you make statistics up on the spot and you don't tell us where it comes from, I'm going to assume you made it up on the spot, and it's going to hurt your credibility and won't count as one of the sources that you need for the speech. Alright, moving on along. After you've made it through your 3 main points that have established the main chunk of your speech, you're almost done, but you've got to finish strong, and that's where we move into the conclusion. First thing that you want to do is reassert and reinforce the thesis. In that, you'll also want to review the main points that you talked about and find a way to close effectively. Let's break these down. Alright, first thing. So you're sitting there in your speech and you've just finished talking about your final, and let's say for this example, 3rd main point. At that point, you need to send a signal to your audience that you're almost done. A statement that we call the Brakelight statement is what you're looking for. Now, there are a lot of different ways to do a Brakelight statement. The boring one would be, in conclusion, or to sum up, signals the speech is coming down, but can be kind of boring. Try to find a way that kind of fits with the theme of your speech and is a little more creative than that, especially if you want to score in the highest category of organization. After you've given that Brakelight signal, you want to refer back to your thesis. Now, what people have done in the past that has been really effective is to kind of mimic the wording of your thesis. The idea is that you want to use a wording that calls to the original thesis into memory. Finally, assert that you've accomplished the goals of your thesis statement and try to leave the audience members with a feeling that you've done this and that they are now filled with the information that will allow them to understand their topic. All right. At this point, it's probably a good time to go back and review the major points of your speech. Again, using parallel wording to mimic the preview that you gave earlier on the speech would be good. So at the beginning, when you were just about to go into the body, you preview the 3 main points that your speech is going to be about. Now, at the end, you want to do something along the lines as like, okay, let's review. Today, I talked about main point 1. Then I talked about main point 2. And finally, we explored main point 3. Nice, simple review, mimics what you've already said, and kind of reinforces the things back into the audience's mind. Finally, it may not be a bad idea to explain to them just briefly in one sentence why looking at these 3 points overall accomplished your thesis. All right, now this is where a lot of people fumble at the very end. You want to close effectively. It's important to finish strong. So when you close your speech, you should try to craft a statement that reinforces the message and leaves the audience with a clear feeling about what was accomplished in your speech. So, for example, you might finalize the adaptation by discussing the benefits of listening to your speech and explaining why the audience members, or what the audience members might be able to do with this information. However, if you really, really want to give a good ending, you should try to find a creative and stylized ending. This is in structure very similar to what you did at the beginning with the attention getter, except it happens at the end. So try to find something that is artistic and effective. You may even want to tie back to the attention getter. So if you gave a quotation, maybe hint back at that again and kind of do the little sandwich with the attention getter and the finalizer. It's really important that this is a part that you practice a lot. This is the last thing that your speakers are going to remember. So if you're going to memorize parts of your speech, the attention getter and this finalizer are probably the best parts to memorize. That way, when your audience sees you finish, they're like, dang, that was a good speech. And as it says here, your goal is to try to leave the audience interested. Oops. And technology sucks. There we go. All right. So now that we've talked about the main chunk of the speech, I want to spend a few minutes talking about the visual aid portion. So, as you may have noticed in your packet, this is the informative PowerPoint speech. The PowerPoint part is a little bit of a throwback to where PowerPoint was new and exciting. We adapt that a little bit and try to make it more of a practical use of the PowerPoint technology to enhance your speech. So a couple of things that goes along with it. First, PowerPoint sucks. And typically in the past when I've let students use PowerPoint, it takes 20 minutes to get the thumb drive plugged in or download it off email, and it doesn't work and it doesn't look right and it causes problems. Next thing I know, I'm using twice as many days from the format as what I plan to. To avoid that problem, I have instead, over the last couple semesters, had my students use Google Docs instead. Now, if you have a Gmail account, feel free to use that one. However, you all have the Wildcat Gmail accounts, and part of that is that it gives you a Google Docs account that you can use by simply logging into your Wildcat email and clicking on the Docs button. So you can go ahead and do that, and that will give you a fantastic web-based program that doesn't cause me as many headaches and keeps Stephen Colbert happy. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what you're looking for. First off, this is not a book. I don't want you to stand up and just read information off slides. It's not effective. You're probably going to do it in all your other classes. So instead, let's use the technology to provide stimulating imagery to your speech and not have your audience reading words off of PowerPoint the entire time instead of focusing on you. So, no slides of text, no bullet points, none of that stuff. Instead, what I want you guys to do is use imagery to enhance your speech. Some things that work pretty well. First off, having vivid full screen imagery that talks about your message that you can use to illustrate a point. Charts and graphs are great, especially when you can find some way to really tie that into a crux point of your speech. And finally, embedding short video clips. A couple things in the video clips, however. They should be really no longer than 15 seconds. If they have sound and stuff in the background, sometimes it works best just to mute the sound, talk over the sound, and explain what's happening. So if you have an imagery or a video of a model that you're trying to explain, or a piece of technology that shows how it's built, mute the sound, you do the talking, and we can listen to what's his name later. Finally, over the course of a 7-minute speech, you should not have more than 1 minute of visual imagery. That means that if you're going to show an image, you should put it up quickly, explain, this is the image, this is why I'm showing it to you, great, and then turn the image off. The point is that you don't want to let images become distracting. If you leave them up for long periods of time, that's exactly what's going to happen. Show the image, explain the visual aid, and then turn it off and move on. What I find works best is leaving a blank slide in the image. That way you have a nice blank spot that you can look at. So here's a couple examples of visual imagery from a sample speech that we're going to watch here, or at least I'll give the link below if you want to watch a sample speech if you didn't catch it in class. The sample speech that we watched for video critique number 2 is on cloned meat. It doesn't have any visual aids, so I've included some sample ones that may have worked here. As you can see, nice full screen image. If you want to bring in some text, that's fine. You can have it over the image or perhaps underneath the image if you feel that the text is necessary to describe what you're looking at. Or you can just show the image and be like, this is cloned meat. Here's an example of a chart showing a percentage of world starvation. Here is a good example of full screen vivid imagery that also illustrates worldwide starvation. I could probably connect to a cloned meat speech. Here is an example of factory farming and the horrors involved. And finally, here's an example of a short 15-second video clip. I have the sound turned off, and so we can just listen to what cloned meat really is. And I will translate for Charlton Heston. It's people. Cloned meat is people. And so and so. But as you can see, very short clip, about 15 seconds. Something like this is great. What you don't want to do is have a full minute of your speech take up showing us a video clip. Short clip's good, long clip's bad. All right, so that concludes the basic, very rough run-through of this lecture. Hopefully, if you missed today's lecture or just need to review this, answered some of your questions. If there's anything else that I can do to further help you out, by all means, kick me an email either on Vista or through normal email. I also have office hours every Monday from 12 to 2. I'd be glad to talk to you during those times. Good night. I'll catch you later, guys.